event. It's more than a race, it's an event, the Race of Remembrance. And as I say, we're waiting for Lee Bristow to make a scheduled pit stop in the Solo 64 Caterham. And when that pit stop happens, it will allow Rob Boston back to the lead of the race. So when we get to the top of the hour and 4 hours completed, let me make a prediction that it will be Rob Boston that leads. But problems that have come up, there have been a lot of gearbox problems affecting drivers in all categories, whether it's been in the Morgan, in the Lotus. John Earp's Lotus yesterday had gearbox problems, and Thursday it had gearbox problems. Rob Boston's car has so far proved reliable. Will it continue to be so? Well, I'm sure we could ask him, and even he wouldn't be sure. The lap time's pretty consistent. Rob Boston, when he does take the lead, is going to do it purely by virtue of the pit stop of the car ahead of it. He's not going to do it by virtue of being faster than the car ahead of it. Not in these conditions at this time of the race. Right, so still Lee Bristow stays out there, and the number 64 car then, and 124 laps completed, and that's a remarkable efficiency. I just wonder whether any of these Caterhams have managed to fit a slightly larger fuel tank to them, just to give them that extra bit of mileage on the car. You've got to be careful when you do that, because you end up having an extremely heavy car that you can't actually do anything with when it's full of fuel. But I do think they may have, just for the benefit of this race, used a slightly bigger fuel tank, and in order to give Lee Bristow that extra little bit of distance. Rob Boston then kind of lurking in the wings. I said earlier, he's not going any quicker than the Caterham. In fact, on that last lap, he was going a bit slower than the Caterham, because Lee Bristow going as fast in that car as anybody has gone. I thought Giuseppe Fillet was the quick driver. Well, Lee Bristow proving that he's a quick driver, because he's going faster than any of them. So Bristow leading, waiting for that third pit stop. Then Rob Boston, Steve McCulley, having recently taken over the Rocket Racing Caterham. He's got plenty of fuel aboard his car. Then we've got Michael Edwards. He too will be due another pit stop fairly soon with the Lotus Elise relay car. Then we've got the Lodge Sports Racing Porsche Cayman, number 15, the car that started on the front, remember, then suffered that penalty and dropped a lap behind. Steve Daly has run well since then in that car, but whether that car has to do another pit stop soon, I think maybe it's up. No, I think it does have a pit stop to come fairly soon. Then we've got Ollie Smith with the Relay Caterham 61 car, and then Darrell Cresswell with his relay car. So 3 of the relay cars now in the top 10. In fact, 3 of them in the top 7. Jason McInulty back into the Able Care Lotus Elise number 117 that was second for a long time and then dropped back with a long pit stop. Ninth place, number 71, get it right, is the Q6 Motorsports car, which Toby Boys has fairly recently taken over in the last 15 minutes. And then rounding out the top 10 is now a new leader in Class B because George Grant, having just taken over the Clapham North MOT Mazda, has lost the lead of Class B to the Track Scotland car, Adam Morrison taking over in the lead of that class.
Paul, just looking at the leaderboard at the moment, we said the Caterhams looked somehow never to be an endurance car, but when you look at the value of a Caterham against some of the other cars that are out there, the Caterham is the epitome of the club racing car, isn't it, really? Years ago we would have looked and said Formula Ford would have been that, and I've always thought the Caterhams today are rather like Formula Fords back in period, in terms of volume, in terms of close racing and so on and so forth, but a little bit more versatile. A little more versatile in that you can use it for this sort of endurance racing. And it's no great surprise to see the Caterhams actually out there at the front. A very basic racing car in many respects in comparison with some of the others. But just looking at the race order now, it's a Caterham 270R that leads. Got Rob Boston in the Lotus Elise in second place, and Rocket Racing in third with their 270R as well. So Caterhams have it, and it's a testimony to those cars that they could become increasingly reliable over the years. Of course, we're used to seeing Caterhams originally with the K-Series Rover engine in them. They used to be a little bit temperamental at times, but and not possibly the ideal endurance engine. But since they've moved on to the Sigma engines and everything else, the reliability factor has increased considerably. But the raceability of a Caterham remains undiminished, and in fact even more so these days. So no great surprise to see the Caterhams up there. Paul has an insight to this sort of thing and predicted not very long ago that we would see a Mazda MX-5 in the top 10. Well, a couple of laps ago, one did bounce almost into the top 10. It's now back into 12th place. That's the Clapham North MOT car. That's car number 169 back in 12th place. The Paul Sheard car was looking to be vying for a top 10 position a little while ago, the 127 car. Talking to Paul Sheard a little bit earlier, Paul had a definite strategy for his cars based on fuel consumption, and Paul was talking about fuel tank sizes and stuff earlier on. Talking to Paul, it sounded as if he'd worked out that consumption rates would give them about an hour per driver, which makes for fairly easy calculations, really. If you know that you're going to do 1 hour, you just set the alarm on your watch and wait for that hour to tick by, drivers back out and ready to go. So Paul Sheard then, their car back in 14th place at the moment. One car that's featuring increasingly in this is the Track Scotland Mini Cooper. Now, for those of you who know about minis, and I'm sure many of you do these days, the fact that the Track Scotland car is a Mini R50 Cooper means that it's a naturally aspirated, the original 1600 Mini Cooper with the Chrysler Neon engine in it, probably converted to a 6-speed gearbox from the early Mini Cooper S's. The very early Mini Cooper R50s had Midland gearboxes in it, 5-speed, and the Mini Challenge, both here and in Scotland, used to use those 5-speed gearboxes, but it was a bit like a box of cheese, really, and it would start to strip third and second gears very quickly if you had a driver who's less than sympathetic with it. So cunningly, it was worked out that you could change it the gearbox to the Cooper S 6-speed arrangement. The early cars, the early Cooper S's had quite a long diff in it, which suited the torque characteristics of the R50 and made the whole package very reliable indeed. Scotland held on to the R50 much longer than the UK Mini Challenge, so the Fat Track Scotland have got their car out there running in that configuration and proving to be pretty competitive. If you look at it, you think about the horsepower and everything else, that's giving away to some of the others. The Mini Cooper, never the lightest car on the planet, but the 55 Mini then in 10th place and looking a reliable possible top 6 finisher.
Well, there's sticking your neck out, Andrew. Well done. If it's not a top 6 finisher, then certainly a Mazda will be a top 10 finisher. How about that? Yes, I mean, it's interesting that you pulled out of the leaderboard there those two cars, the Mini and the Mazda, running in Class D, check my eyes, Class B of the race, and they've been trading places in Class B. Who leads? The Clapham North MOT car has been in the front of it, and then the lead has gone back to the Track Scotland car, in probably favour of the Track Scotland car, has been in the head more than the Mazda has, but between the two of them they've been propping up the bottom of the top 10, and as I say, at the same time they've been battling for the overall class honours in Class B, so an interesting battle between Mini and Mazda. And yes, I didn't know any of that about the differences between the different types of R50, so thank you for that explanation, Andrew. Even if a lot of people did know, I certainly didn't, so it was a useful explanation, thank you. I'm still waiting for Lee Bristow to come into the pits because, we're up to, in fact, 4 hours has gone of the race. We have less than 2 remaining in the race part 1 of tonight's race, and Lee Bristow still hasn't been in for fuel, which quite frankly amazes me. The gap first to second has remained at 30 seconds plus, 35 seconds it was last time around, between Lee Bristow's Caterham and the Lotus Elise in second place. And as I say, I am just astounded that Lee Bristow has been able to go for this long, because he's not been hanging around either. It's not like he's been pussyfooting it. The best lap of the race for that car, the best lap of the race overall, set by the Lotus Elise, but the best lap of the race so far for that car, the Lee Bristow car, set only about 5 or 10 laps to go. So Lee's not been hanging around, but he's getting very good mileage indeed from his Caterham.
Interesting situation, Paul. Just watching 3 cars going up into target that time. We had a Caterham on a real charge, diving up the inside of a couple of the saloon cars into target. And I suspect probably one of those saloon cars didn't actually see the Caterham coming. They're that much smaller, I suppose, despite the lights. And cut him off a little bit aggressively. And that nearly ended up with a tangle of 3 cars, but luckily they all survived it. The Caterham losing a bit of ground as a result, but a bit of a heart-stopping moment for somebody up there, I think.
Yes, I mean, full beam is the order of the day as far as headlights is concerned, and you don't really want to be looking in the rear view mirror to see how fast the car behind you is catching you up. So a lot of the time you're going to be glancing in the mirror, yes, see if there's a car there, yes, but do you have the time to judge how quickly it's gaining on you? Probably not. So in a way, these are very difficult times for the drivers. The nighttime driving requires good judgment, not just from those who are doing the overtaking, but for those who are being overtaken, to make sure that they leave enough space for faster cars coming up behind them. Very difficult job to do.
Absolutely, and in that case I think the 2 saloon cars were actually vying for position themselves, so the fact that the Caterham was a little bit the interloper in the situation, probably catching them all out to a certain extent. Must say the some of the lighting systems on the cars out there, Paul, making them very distinctive, aren't they?
Some make life very easy and some less easy, should we put it that way. There are some cars that go past and you actually honestly have no idea what number is on the side of the car, whereas others are lit up very clearly. Others use different ways of identification with various LED coloured lights, either over roll hoops or across the roof rails or around the B frame of a Mini, if a B frame exists on a Mini, and various parts of the car illuminated. Predominantly that's to help the team identify their car from a distance. It helps us, but of course the thing that helps us the most is having a decent number.
Attention pit lane, just a reminder to all Race Remembrance teams, the bulletin that we issued yesterday at 16:01. Part Ferme conditions will not apply this evening after part 1 of the race. Part Ferme conditions will not apply, so you can refuel your cars this evening. But be please reminded that the driver that finishes tonight must start the race again tomorrow. So the driver that finishes tonight must start the race tomorrow. But part Ferme conditions will not apply this evening, as per the bulletin issued yesterday at 16:01.
Able to find their car in the middle of the night.
That's right, yes. But then again, there are strict rules governing the way that lights are identified, whereas I think the Race Remembrance, it's pretty much anything goes. The other thing which springs to mind is the Nurburgring 24-hour race. I don't know if you've ever watched that closely, but the top 40 cars in that race carry a blue flashing light. So what you see behind you, if you're being chased by one of the top 40 cars, is a blue flashing light. And what more grabs the attention than your rearview mirror than a blue flashing light? And that's still used in the... which I'm not sure it is used now because they have a slightly different display system on the Nurburgring 24 hours, but for a long time that was the way to draw attention. And I think the blue flashing light and a yellow flashing light is the only thing that you're not allowed to have in the Race of Remembrance, just because it can be confused with a track service car.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. But yes, it's interesting you mentioned the Nurburgring 24-hour race because that highlights another factor about this, and you look at the potential speed differential here between the Hondas, for example, or the Lotus, Rob Boston's Lotus, and that of a C1 or a BMW 116, and it's quite a lot of difference in potential speed. So you've got to have your wits about you. Out in the Nurburgring in the VLN and the 24-hour race, the difference between, say, a Toyota GT86 in their Cup series out there, which runs within the 24-hour race, and something like a GT3 Mercedes AMG, that is scary difference.
And yes, you're running quite close to the limit, and the barriers are never far away either. There's one thing I do have to correct about something that we were talking about earlier on, and that is part Ferme rules tonight into tomorrow morning, because I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that the tyres were going to be marked and fuel fillers were going to be sealed, so you weren't able to refuel, but apparently that wasn't true. Either I didn't read it or a bulletin has been issued to clarify the matter, but another bulletin has now been issued which clarifies that there is no part Ferme restrictions overnight. You can do whatever you want to the car overnight. The only rule is that the driver who finishes the 6 hours tonight will have to start the whatever it's going to be, 2 hour and a half or less than 2 hours tomorrow morning, but we'll start the 2 hours tomorrow morning from zero drive time, so they won't have to count back however long they were driving tonight into tomorrow morning's portion of the race, but it does have to be the same driver as was driving the race and when it finishes tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
So you can change anything you want on the car. That's the other important thing, because I was talking to one team that were adamant that they were going to change the brakes pads, not the disc, just the pads overnight, and they were convinced that was going to be allowed. And I said, well, I'm not sure, you'll have to check, but there is, as I say, no part Ferme constraints at all, and you can basically, as long as you pick the car up from part Ferme and put it back again ready for the restart tomorrow morning, you can do whatever you want.
Well, that gives a better finishing prospect for most of the teams, doesn't it? Which reads well at the end of a result, end of a race.
Unless you're a mechanic who was hoping to get to bed at 10:30,
yeah,
and you've suddenly been told you've got 4 hours work to do before you can go to bed tonight.
Paul, as a mechanic, there's no fun in a race meeting like this unless you're doing an all-nighter and you can then have bragging rights in the pub next week to say, do you know what I did last weekend?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I used to think that when I was 30, but as time has passed, I have a different view on the world now. I need my beauty sleep. Rob Boston leads the race again. So what changes we thought were going to happen have happened. Will Rossetti has taken over the wheel of the Solo 64 Caterham, number 64. So he takes over the driving responsibilities from Lee Bristow, who was at the wheel of the number 64 car. So it's Rossetti then at the wheel of 64. He's dropped down to third place, and that allows Rob Boston to take over at the front of the field, a lap ahead to the good of the rest, which is around about the pace that I thought that car would have. But of course, it will have to make another pit stop between now and the end of the race. I don't think even Rob Boston can take the car for 2 hours on a tank full of fuel. So Rob will have to stop for another 4-minute pit stop between now and the end of the race. Steve McCulley is in second place with the Rocket Racing car, Caterham, as I say, a lap behind the Lotus. Then the second of the Caterhams in third place. The Lotus Elise relay team is going very well. Michael and Bailey Edwards. The race started by Michael. Bailey did the middle stint. Michael's now back at the wheel of that car, or I should say he's now got his car out because it's a 2-car team for the ES Motorsport relay team, and they lead the relay class. And then it's the Porsche Cayman, number 15, Lodge Sports Racing, Steve Daly in the car at the moment, and it's in fifth place. And then in sixth place is the second of the relay team cars, car number 61, Ollie Smith, at the wheel of the AOPF Motorsport car in sixth place. Those are the top positions. The Mazda of the Clapham North team is back into the lead of the B class with the number 169, George Grant, at the wheel, and he leads Class B ahead of the Track Scotland car, which has slipped down to 13th place overall now. But they really do chop and change at every pit stop between the Mazda from the Clapham North team and the Track Scotland Mini. Separating the two of them is the number 29 Morgan. This is the regular Morgan, if I can call it that, not the one which is has the disabled mechanics on it, the engineering car that we were talking to James Cameron about. But the other car, the 29 car, is currently with Tom Richards at the wheel, and that separates the two cars that are leading, squabbling over the Class B honours. So the Morgan, a more powerful car in terms of its power to weight ratio, but for whatever reason, just not quite as quick as the other cars in Class D. Still, though, great to have that Morgan here and playing its part in the Race of Remembrance, currently in 12th place overall.
Well, ES Motorsport, Lotus Elise, looking to be a podium contender in this, Paul, I think. And the strength of that relay team getting greater as the race seems to unfold. I think they may be in at the moment, but 4 laps adrift from the leaders, and got it all to do in a way. They had a few little issues from memory a while ago, but ES Motorsport, they're based, I think, from memory in Norfolk near Snetterton, and over here, having travelled the breadth of the country to get here to Anglesey, and yep, seen them racing a lot over at Snetterton Way, and really good, competent race team, ES Motorsport.
What I'd be interested
steeped in Lotus history.
Yeah, what I'd be interested to know, Andrew, when you get the opportunity when you're next down in the pit lane, originally the ES Motorsport was supposed to be running a single Lotus in the Class D in the Heroes Trophy, and just swapping drivers between Michael and Bailey. But they moved classes across into the relay team so that they could run each having their own car. That makes me think they were worried about reliability, and I just wonder if, when you talk to them, they might either admit to that or say, yes, that's exactly what we were thinking as well. But obviously, the Lotus is a quick car. We've got Rob Boston to prove that.
Absolutely, and I think they're sharing a garage with John Earp's Lotus as well, and we know what issues that was having.
So yes, it may well be an insurance.
A long time.
It may well be an insurance policy. It may well be that they haven't got enough gearboxes for. Well, no, they've got to have 2 gearboxes because they've got 2 cars running. So anyway, no, it's just an interesting thought because the original entry list had them down as a Class D car, and then it got moved across into the relay class at a relatively late stage.
I'll go and do a little bit of research in a while.
A little bit of investigative journalism as and when you can in the remaining, just over an hour and a half of the race. Part 1, I'll talk about the end of the race, but it doesn't really end at 9 o'clock tonight. It will pause at 9 o'clock tonight, and then we'll start it all again tomorrow morning, and that's when it really gets serious with the hour and a half or so of running before the service of remembrance, and then 10 hours or so after that to finish the 12 hours after the service of remembrance. And that's as well when it gets more complicated, because what we see on the screen won't exactly match what's on the track.
Just trying to fathom out where the 999 car was, the other Honda Civic, because that is back in 21st place. The other RKC Motorsport car, the Honda Civic Type R, back in 21st place. And looking at the pace that the 99 car was making earlier, let's have a look and see.
Yeah, down in 43rd place, the 99 car. That car you described to us having that gearbox issue, and still in the garage having the gearbox replaced, I think you said.
Well, I think that's the only way they could possibly resolve the situation, was to swap the gearbox.
What we may well see then is Ricky Coomber switching his allegiance over to the 999 car, because he is down to drive both cars, and if the 99 is going to be in the garage having that gearbox problem rectified by whatever means they can, then it may well be that we see Ricky Coomber getting out and driving the other car, which runs in Class C, so wouldn't be expected to be challenging for overall honours. But the 999 car currently running second in Class C. Mark Simmons is back at the wheel of it. Leading Class C at the moment is the Porsche Autosport Mazda MX-5 with, that's car number 127. That's the car we like, especially because it's got a number that's easy to read. Neil Luke at the wheel of that car at the moment, and he's in 17th place overall, but to say, importantly as far as he's concerned, leading the class ahead of the 999 car. Neil Luke having completed 127 laps, 125 laps on the board for the RKC Motorsport Honda Civic.
Yeah, so it's about 2 laps difference at the moment, isn't it? And the Mazda MX-5's famous last words, almost the Murray Walker kiss.
Don't say it, don't say it.
Where you say he only has to stand up to win and promptly falls off the circuit. But the Mazda MX-5's, the Mazda engine in those Mark III cars, basically the same as a Ford Duratec engine, which is not a million miles away from a Sigma engine in some respects. The Duratec renowned for a degree of longevity and lots of torque, so you're never really stressing the thing quite as much as you might do with some other engines, and Paul Sheard has been around these cars for a long time. He knows the ins and outs of them. He's raced in the just about every incarnation of a Mazda MX-5 that's ever existed and rallied them. So probably has a fair inkling for how to play this game. So he'll be looking at Class C victory if he can keep this momentum going.
Yes, absolutely. And as you say, it's just a matter of keeping the momentum going. But, you know, we've seen all sorts of drama in the 4.5 hours we've had of the race thus far. I've no doubt there's going to be something unexpected happens between now and the end of part 1. And then parts 2 and 3 tomorrow, no doubt will bring their own drama, because, I don't know, there's something about, I've watched a lot of endurance racing over my time, and there's something about stopping a car, letting it cool down, and starting it up again, which they don't like. Cars have feelings, you know, and they don't like it when you stop them and start them. They want to be run all the time.
You're absolutely right, and I think it's fascinating that if you look at some engines deal with heat cycles in a completely different way to others. You can look at that in karting terms from those old Honda generator engines which are used for karting a lot. The best engines quite often the ones which have been through huge number of heat cycles and developed the set and then been tuned from there, and they withstand any degree of hot and cold. Whereas a new engine, exactly the same specification, you stop it, go to start it again, and it always felt slightly different on the restart. And I think the same applies to racing engines in other vehicles as well, and multi-cylinder. Some just built for more endurance, more durability perhaps, others wanting to be slightly more thoroughbred, and maybe the thoroughbred ones suffer a little bit more from that start-stop technology.
We'll wait and see. I mean, it's just injecting a little bit more interest into the way that the Race of the Remembrance is structured. It's a 12-hour race from start to finish, but over the course of those 12 hours, yes, you do have to stop and start on 2 occasions. Once overnight, from 9 o'clock tonight until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then we'll have another shorter break for the Remembrance service tomorrow morning. They'll be stopping the race tomorrow morning at about 10 to 11. They'll be lining everybody up. They won't actually take them off the track. They won't go into Parc Fermé tomorrow morning. They'll take them and line them up on the start-finish line in single file, and then we'll have the service of the Remembrance, and then the restart will take place in a single file behind the safety car. So a much shorter heat cycle to go through in tomorrow morning's break than there will be overnight tonight, obviously.
Yeah, but that point about start-stop is really interesting, because from a psychology point of view, when you know the thing's running and you're on a roll with it, you want it to keep going, don't you? You don't want to chance your arm turning for too long and starting again, because odd things can happen. And maybe they'll see a change in fortunes.
I think everybody has been to enough I'd say everybody. Those of us who are as old as you and I are, Andrew, have seen races where, you know, it has been the end of the race, the closing half hour, the closing 15 minutes, even the closing lap of a long distance race, where you just do something silly and something funny happens. You know, your mind goes back to Nigel Mansell in the Canadian Grand Prix when he started waving to the crowd before the race had finished, and the car ended up conking out on him. You know, Toyota at Le Mans 3 years ago, who knows what they did which caused the problem there. But, you know, these things happen, and it's why we were saying there's so many jobs to do in an endurance race, but each member of the team has to keep on top of his game throughout, because one person drops the ball in that juggling act and the ball gets dropped. It doesn't matter who dropped it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was a memorable moment for Nigel Mansell, wasn't it? Wave at the crowd and knock the car out of gear, and then not be able to get it back in again. Yes, one of those things that goes down in history. Or chancing your arm with tyres in Adelaide or wherever it was in Australia. and trying to go that extra lap because you just felt the car felt right at the time?
I've only been to the Canadian Grand Prix once, and that was the time. Nigel Mansell never forgave me. I was his bad luck charm. Anyway, the race of remembrance continues. An hour and a half left to go. 4.5 hours in the books. Rob Boston leads by a lap, and to say he will be due one more pit stop before the end of the race. And I suppose the question is going to be the Caterhams who are chasing him, who currently are lapping, well, in the case of Steve McCulley, yes, a little bit quicker than the Lotus, are going to be due to do certainly one, and I think probably 2 pit stops before the end of the race, whereas the Lotus will get to the end of this part with just 1 further pit stop. So they'll be able to then use the interval, of course, to refuel, and that will give them the opportunity to then get to the break on 1 further pit stop. So things looking good for the Rob Boston team at the moment. Remember, they had a lucky stroke, or a stroke of luck, earlier on in the race when the safety car came out, just when they were due their pit stop. So it was a routine pit stop that they were waiting for to come in for. And then the safety car came out, and immediately after that, Rob Boston was able to come into the pits, whereas the Caterhams, who were challenging him quite severely, all had to make that same pit stop under green flag conditions. And that really was where that lap of a lead that the Rob Boston car does now have, that's where that came from. And as I say, it's going to take some more penalties or something else to slow down the Lotus Elise, or that horrible word, unreliability.
Looking at the race order at the moment, the possible outside contender in this one, of course, is still the Porsche Cayman, sitting there conveniently in 4th place, just off the podium at the moment, but only 2 laps away from a podium position. And the Cayman is, as we said earlier on, a little bit Germanic in reliability. And it does make you wonder whether that could actually hang on. No, I was going to ask you a question, Paul, because you're well up to speed with these, with the regulations on this. The relay teams, obviously the Caterhams are in there with relays. And if you ended up with a situation where you get a relay car that fails for one reason or another, whether you can then continue the race with a single car, and I think you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Caterhams are covering their options quite well, but you still got that Lodge Sports Racing Cayman waiting in the wings to pick up the pieces.
Yes, I mean, you're right. The Porsche is going to have to rely on its reliability. It's going to have to depend on something happening to the cars ahead of it, because it won't be able to win this race on pace. However, if the cars ahead strike problems, then yes, it is ideally placed to take advantage, as are the relay cars, because again, should something serious happen to one of the cars ahead, then they're going to have to waste time in the pits being repaired. If something happens of a serious nature, gearbox, engine, to the Caterhams in the relay teams, and I should stress that the 2 Caterhams which are better placed at the moment, the 2 Caterhams in 2nd and 3rd, are Heroes Trophy cars, single car entries. The relay cars are the ones running in 4th and 5th places. In 5th and 6th places, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, 5th and 6th.
5th and 6th, the relay cars. They have the extra bullet in the gun, as it were, so should anything happen to one of the cars, then they can just carry on using either the singleton other car in the case of the Lotus team, or in the case of the number 61 team, which is currently just come into the pits, having been in 5th place. The 61 car has 3 different cars at its disposal, each of the 3 drivers having their own car. And apart from just the sheer comfort of being in one car rather than the other, provided the driver can fit into somebody else's car, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to continue with the pace that the car can show, provided they don't break all three of them, of course.
Yep. Keep looking, we've talked a little bit about history along the way. Looking down at that Porsche Cayman under the Lodge Sports Racing name, you probably remember, as I do, the Lodge Corner Agencies.
Yes.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
It was. They were a great sponsor of motor racing, though.
They were indeed. Lodge Corner Agencies, I think they wheeled and dealed in race cars and stuff, didn't they?
I've no idea what they did. It's one of those things, a bit like Lombank. I went through years of my life never knowing what Lombank did, but I knew there was a Lombank trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you sort of glance these names and it just evokes memories along the way.
Yes, that car, the Porsche Cayman, number 15, having started from the front row of the grid, got hit with a penalty very early on. That's what dropped it part of the way back. Doesn't quite have the fuel longevity of the Rob Boston Lotus, but it's still pretty good. It's better than the Caterhams, and again, touching wood, if it can be reliable as a Porsche is supposed to be, then currently running fourth, no reason why it shouldn't finish on one step of the podium or another. But as Andrew and I were saying, it's going to depend on some misfortune befalling those cars ahead of it at the moment.
Well, your prediction was right, Paul, because Clapham North MOT with their Mazda MX-5 made it up into 9th place, so they're into the top 10 now. A little bit of a change back down through the order as well, because Track Scotland were actually running nose to tail, but now split by the PT Motorsport Caterham. But Track Scotland, rather, get the right teeth in 12th and 14th position in their minis at the moment, which means that Paul Sheard has probably moved back a few spaces in his MX-5.
It does also mean that George Grant's Clapham North MOT Mazda will be due a pit stop relatively soon, though, because the only reason it's moved that far up the list is because it has run for as long as it can on the tank full of fuel that it has got. The next pit stop, well, will it drop it out of the top 10 or not? I think it probably will. We'll see. But over the next 10 or 15 minutes, I think George Grant will be due in for his next stop. And as I say, that will drop him down again. He's already, or so far, done 2 pit stops in this race. So he's been very efficient thus far. This is the car that George Grant shares with the Nick Rutter. Nick, very quick indeed behind the wheel, and once he gets hold of the car, then he's a very rapid driver indeed, and so no doubt will bring the challenge back to the Track Scotland car, and then we'll have a battle on the track. But it's so important that you make your pit stop right down to the 4-minute limit. It has to be 4 minutes. Anything over that is just wasted time. And so it's really important that you've got somebody on the stopwatch saying, okay, we've had 1 minute, 3 minutes to go, 2 minutes, 2 minutes to go, but you then count down. And the time spent in the pit lane between the pit entrance and the pit exit, that counts as well. So what you need to do is to even bear in mind how long it takes for the driver ID to identify itself, and take that into your calculation as well, so that you spend absolutely as close as you can to 4 minutes in the pit lane.
Yeah, so comes back to your strategy argument, doesn't it? But looking at, I was just looking at the lap times, and Rob Boston, just on pace alone, looks to be heading his way to some degree of favourite for this race. Fastest lap from them, a 1:37.388. Looking back through the order, you can't really see anybody else getting too close to that other than the Solo 64 W Rossetti Caterham 270R. Setting a 1:39. So Rob Boston looking at the moment to be almost a clear 2 seconds faster than anything else on the circuit.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say Rob, when he's at the wheel of the car, is rarely slower than the Caterhams. And that's where the driver difference is between him and Peter Mansfield, the other driver of that car, because Peter is rarely quicker than the Caterhams, whereas Rob is rarely slower than the Caterhams. They're both, there's not a lot in it, there's only a couple of seconds here and there, but it is the only difference, and they have to share the driving equally between themselves. Because if one of them does try and drive a little bit longer, or one of them tries to have a shorter stint, if they try and minimise the driving for Peter Mansfield, for example, they end up overstepping the mark for the drive time for Rob Boston. So that comes back to bite you. So they have to share the driving equally between the two of them, one stint per driver, because if they do 2 stints each and try and double stint it, they'll end up overstepping the drive time mark.
Yep, real balance to be had. How are the Morgans faring? Because it's great to see the manufacturer actually getting totally involved in this, and we had representation of that a little earlier. So Morgan Motor Company, their number 29 car, 16th place overall, and looking fairly strong in that.
Yeah, Shane Kelly, a regular in the F3 Cup, so he's used to probably faster machinery than what he's driving at the moment, and hopefully the number 29 team will be hoping is a safe pair of hands as well. The Morgan Motor Company being supported by the University of Wolverhampton, who are here in force, and as well we were able to talk to Steve Morris from the Morgan Motor Company, man at the top, managing director of the Morgan Motor Company, was here earlier on, and very happy as well that the Morgan Motor Company is involved with the Race of Remembrance, and motorsport, and as Mission Motorsport proves, not just from a point of view of marketing the brand, but also what it can do for people, and helping people to find jobs, to be educated through the university program and everything like that. So a proud, independent British sports car manufacturer, and good to have them here with what is fundamentally a works team.
Absolutely. And hearing earlier on that Morgan have actually created a new visitor experience. So for those of you interested in cars like this, definitely worth a visit to Morgan to go and have a look at that. It's a fascinating tour at any time, just understanding precisely how those cars are put together. I don't know whether you've done that one, Paul.
No, I haven't. No, it's interesting.
Definitely worth a tour. The craftsmanship that goes into a Morgan is complete, really, because there's every aspect of it, from joinery through to fabrication, steel fabrication, and proper engineering.
Yes, absolutely, and it's good that, as I say, we're able to experience that. And interesting as well what Steve was saying about the global reach of the company as well. Yes, it is a British manufacturer, but interest abounds beyond these shores into the foreign markets as well, and they're finding that their business is being handicapped and made more difficult by various supply chain difficulties that we've had recently, as much as anything else.
Yeah, you can't rely on purely domestic market these days, and I can imagine that some of the politics that reign across export-import issues must make life more than a little challenging for something like that. Well, up into target, 4 cars abreast pretty much, 2 of which were Caterhams that time. This time rather more successfully negotiating turn 1 and heading up into the banking to complete another lap. Fastest part of the circuit here, Paul, is through School Corner, and just the little reflective markers through there. So you've got to really have your wits about you in that part of the track, because if you encounter somebody like Rob Boston in the Lotus or the Caterhams, which just scythe their way through the traffic, you've got to have your real wits about you through there. typical race speed through the apex of School Corner in most cars is going to be somewhere between 110 and 130 miles an hour, depending on the car. You've got to get the thing down to 40 miles an hour probably for the apex at Rocket Inn. And if you're racing in the dark with a myriad of different paces of cars ahead of you, that takes a little bit of concentration.
And quite a little courage, I wouldn't imagine, as well. I mean, just knowing the way that I approach road driving, I'd be lifting all the way, going up, just might need to just feather off the throttle a little bit here, feather off the throttle. Racing drivers don't do that. They do, I'm doing the other action with my hand here, for those of you who can't see me, as to whether you're lifting or throttle down, throttle down. But for a racing driver, you know, you've got to be in that position where your right foot is pressed to the floor until it doesn't need to be there. And then you need to be off and on the brakes.
You just got to keep it ultimately smooth. And weight transference is something that not everybody fully comprehends, because weight equals grip to a greater or lesser extent. And you can be very subtle with that. So an area like School Corner, where you actually have a degree of steering lock applied, because you're trying to turn that whole complex of the circuit into a gentle arc, you've got a degree of steering going on through there. It's fairly minor, but if you suddenly lift off the throttle going through the apex of School, that minute degree of steering becomes fairly acute. And of course, as you lose, if you gain weight at the front of the car, it's got to come from somewhere, and that's the back. So it's very easy to get to a situation where you're building up a degree of lift-off oversteer in a situation like that. And 120 miles an hour, you really don't want to be doing that at School Corner, when you know the next thing you're going to do is put the brakes on, which is actually going to compound the issue even further.
Yeah, such are the thoughts that have to go through a racing driver's brain when all he really wants to do is know where the next corner is, where the next braking point, where the next turning point is. So, you know, we analyse this art of driving, and yes, it is a very multifaceted thing. A race control message just came up to inform the driver of the Toyota Aygo that he is required to come in and serve a stop-and-go penalty. This is the Team Torpedo car. It was leading the ACC class, has been leading the ACC class for most of the race. I must admit that I've overlooked it for some time because it was in such a comfortable lead, but it is still leading the ACC class. And just look to see where the competition is. There is only one other car in the ACC class, and that's the Bad Obsession Citroen C1, which is in the pits. And I'm tempted to say again rather than still, because that car was in the pits a while ago. But it might be a question of still being in the pits, or it might be a question of that car being in the pits. Just for another stop. But the 69 car then has had a degree of problems throughout the race, which should mean that the 578 Toyota Aygo should be able to, as long as it can keep going, just win that class, because it is a class just of two cars. The message about that stop and go penalty has now been taken off the screen though, so either the message has got through or the penalty has been served. Coming up, 4 hours and 3/4 of the race elapsed. I'll give you a rundown at the top of the hour, just before the final hour of this evening's racing activity. And the 8 o'clock mark on the clocks. So this is where not necessarily the race can be won, but certainly the race can be lost by some inattentiveness. Pleased to say that your friend of mine, the John Earp Lotus, is still going. Just saw it go past the pits a moment ago. I'm not sure quite how far down the list that car has fallen. It was started pretty much plumb last on the grid. Made up a lot of places in the early stages. Since then, it must have had a long pit stop, because the number 5 Lotus Elise is quick when it's running, made up a lot of ground, but it's now down to not quite last place, but not far off last. We've had retirements of, 1, 2, 3, probably 4 cars. Well, no, if we're expecting the Ricky Coomber Motorsport car to reappear at some point after that gearbox problem. Certainly, you gave us the impression, Andrew, that Harry Ormerod, or at least that car, would be resuming at some stage. They weren't throwing in the towel just yet, were they?
No, certainly not. You never do that sort of thing, do you? Not unless
there comes a point where you have to throw in the towel sometimes.
Where you have to, but I think this early in the race,
yeah.
The feeling was that there was maybe something to salvage out of it. Certainly the mechanics were diving under the car with alacrity to try and sort that out. They were into the engine bay and underneath it. So the hope is that they'll get in there and try and change that gearbox and see what they can achieve from there.
The other car which is looking like a retirement is the 59, another TWP racing car, the Mazda MX-5. Car number 59, the car that Brad Philpott brought into the pits, and he's been in the pits for a long time as well. Kyle Harmon stopped after 4 laps and was never seen again, so whatever happened to his car, he was the cause of the first safety car period after the race was just 4 or 5 laps old. Kyle pulled the car up against the pit wall, ground to a halt. The rescue unit was dispatched to bring him back to the pits, but we haven't seen that car again. So one must assume some kind of fatal engine failure or terminal engine failure on that car. And as I say, we haven't seen any more of the number 100. But apart from that, a good 51 of the 53 cars still running pretty healthy and looking dangerous to say likely, but looking quite possible as if they might be able to finish the first 6-hour element of this 12-hour endurance race. Rob Boston continuing to lap faster than anybody else. That last lap at 1 minute 40.166. Again, very rapid indeed, and more rapid than anyone else out there. 1 minute 40.166 then for Rob Boston. Steve McCulley's last lap at 1:43. Will Rossetti disappointingly slow at 1:48. So whether he came across traffic, the problem, of course, with a track as busy as this is, I've just spoken about how little attrition we've had. With the track as busy as this, it does mean that when you come across some traffic, it quite often affects you quite seriously. And with an endurance race of this nature, the best bet is actually to lift, let the cars that are in your way sort themselves out, and then pick your way through safely, albeit a little bit more slowly. And I'm suggesting that's what happened to Will Rossetti on his previous lap, because the lap he's just completed, a much healthier one at 1:43, and that compares much more favourably with the times of the cars immediately ahead and behind him. Harry Eyre at the wheel of the 88 relay team car. The 2 relay Caterhams now running in 4th and 5th, with the Caterham ahead of the Lotus team. So the Breakdancers team of Caterham's number 88, Harry Eyre, driving at the moment ahead of Bailey Edwards with the Lotus Elise team, ES Motorsport. Bailey having recently taken up the baton for ES Motorsport and is driving round again. I doubt he'll be able to get to the finish of part 1 on the current level of fuel. So that team will hand back to Michael Edwards before the end. 6th place is the 61, another of the relay cars. So the relay teams, we knew they'd be reliable because they've got 2 or 3, or in one case 4 cars to choose from. And it's the 4-car team currently which is in the lead of the relay race in 4th place overall. 5th is the Lotus team. 6th is the AOPF Motorsports team, number 61. and 7th is number 777, and that's a Heroes Trophy car, which Danny Holland is driving, and congratulations must go to Danny Holland for winning the biathlon of foolishness earlier on. And safety car coming out there, and yes, not quite being observed by a Morgan, who only saw the flag at the last minute because his mind was distracted by the fact that he had two cars that he was trying to overtake at the same time. So I think it was all safely gathered in. No contact was made by anybody. Whether a position was taken or not, I don't know. But we do have the safety car out. This for the third time, if memory serves. Let me double check memory by checking the notes here. Yes, this is the third safety car period. 27 minutes of the race thus far having been run behind the safety car. And so at the moment we have no indication of quite why the safety car might have been brought out, but it gives the opportunity for a pit stop. If you want to make a pit stop now, then almost certainly you'll be in a position to get to the end of the race or the end of part one of the race on the amount of fuel that you've got on board at the moment. Rescue units being dispatched, 2 rescue units being dispatched up towards target at the moment, which makes me think that the problem, if there is one, is up at the banking again. That's where we had the problem earlier on in the race. Not sure, does Nick still have a camera point focused on the banking? Much shaking of the head from my left. So we've got no inkling of what might have happened up at the banking. We'll just keep our eyes open and see what the rescue units can come back with. Yeah, so an opportunity for pit stops. This one might favour the Caterhams again because they are better due to come in. And in fact, all 3, second, third and fourth of the Caterhams are already in the pit lane. Second being Steve McCulley with the number 97 Rocket Racing car. Third being number 64 Will Rossetti with the Solo 64 car. And third being car number 88 Harrier with the Relay Breakdancers team Caterham. And that will be a change of car as well as driver for the number 88 team. And for all 3, the need to stay in the pits for 4 minutes. But of course, with the safety car out, the 4 minutes has far less of an impact than it would otherwise do. So, say the third safety car of the race, and an hour and 5 minutes of part 1 of the 2021 Race of Remembrance remain. Rob Boston still in the lead of the race. Now, with the safety car trying to pick up the race leader, he's not achieved that just yet, and I think he might just wait until the queue has formed. And of course, Murphy's Law will say that Rob Boston picks just that moment to come into the pit. So we'll give the opportunity to Boston to make his way into the pits. Trying to pick up where he is on the circuit. He's actually on the bus stop straight at the moment, and a very brightly lit car coming into the pits at the moment, which might well be Rob Boston. Yes, taking my life into my hands and peering down there. Rob is taking this chance to come in slightly earlier than the fuel schedule demands, but an opportunity that it would be foolish to miss, it has to say. Rob Boston will... Now, the choice will be, do you leave Rob in the car? Because you don't need to do a driver change. He has drive time remaining to him, so he could run to the end of part 1 and not overstep his drive time limit. So it may well be that we see Rob Boston staying behind the wheel, the team refueling him and sending him on his way to the checkered flag to end part 1. And the Caterhams will get out first, but if the safety car period is long enough that it allows Rob Boston to get out as well, then it will affect all 4 of the leading runners to the same degree. See what happens. Just depends really on how long the safety car stays out. Well, whoever was the cause of this safety car has been rescued. It's being dragged back, I was told. Right, so the car is rolling along, and hopefully that will mean that the safety car will be withdrawn sooner rather than later. The Caterhams' 4 minutes have already elapsed. They're back out on the track. Number 97, Andy Perry now at the wheel of the Rocket Racing car. Giuseppe Fillet at the wheel of this Solo 64 car, number 64. Bailey Edwards out in the Lotus Elise, except that he's not stopped. Bailey Edwards has stayed out through this safety car period. Finlay Riddington in the 61 has stayed out. Sorry, it's Fraser Riddington, not Finlay. So Fraser Riddington in the blue AOPF Caterham has stayed out in number 61. And then the next one through is the relay number 88. We're already back to green flag conditions, and Rob Boston is still in the pit lane. So this is working slightly to the favour of the Caterhams once again. Adam Perry, what ground is he going to be able to make up? He will get back sometime. He won't get back he might get back a full lap. We'll have to wait and see, but wait until we've done a full lap under green. Wait until the number 19 car is back out on the track, and then we'll be able to tell you whether or not Andy Perry has been able to recover a full lap from Rob Boston or not. But this is exactly what happened to Rob Boston earlier on, but the other way around. It worked to Rob Boston's favour before with the safety car. This time it's worked much more to the favour of the Caterhams, who should now, on their current strategy, be able to get to the end of part 1 without having to make a further scheduled pit stop for fuel. More beeping from the mobile phone for no good reason other than I'm getting information through from another motor race somewhere else. Coming up then to 5 hours elapsed, 8 o'clock in the evening here at the Race of Remembrance in Anglesey, and that means just 1 hour remains to go in part 1 of the Race of Remembrance, and it's still Rob Boston's car that leads the race. Peter Mansfield has taken it over, so they didn't take the opportunity to leave Rob in the car. I was saying earlier on their strategy would be to change at every pit stop. Well, actually, that's what they've done, is change at every pit stop. But there was a point I thought where perhaps they might leave Rob in the car. So it'll be Peter Mansfield to drive for the next 60 minutes of the Race of Remembrance. Here's Lotus Elise number 19, continues to lead the race now, but by a lap and a half rather than the 2 laps that it was before. So 19 leads the way. In second place, number 97 is Andy Perry at the wheel of the Rocket Racing Caterham. In third place, number 64, who is a further lap behind with the 64, Solo 64 Caterham. Giuseppe Felle, it is at the wheel of the number 3 car. And then up to 4th as a result of staying out during that safety car period, the AOPF relay team of Fraser Riddington. So Fraser, number 61, moves up to 4th place. Into 5th place remains Bailey Edwards with the Lotus Elise, but he has, well, he's won a place and lost a place in the Lotus Elise. In 6th place is the number 88 Breakdancers team. Tim Steele driving that car. And then 7th is number 15, Colin Gillespie, back at the wheel of the Lodge Sports Racing Porsche Cayman. He's in 7th place with 152 laps completed. In 8th place is number 777, Danny Holland. Danny Holland in 8th place on 152 laps as well. In 9th place on 152 laps is the Able car, Lotus Elise of David McInulty. And in 10th place, number 169, George Grant, leading the way in Class B with the Mazda MX-5 ahead of the Track Scotland Mini, which has dropped a couple of places. George Grant didn't make a pit stop under that safety car, took a gamble, stayed out. We'll see whether that costs him later on. So still an hour to run. That's the top positions in the classes. We've already covered who's leading overall and in Class D. We've covered the leading relay team car. That's Fraser Riddington with the AOPF Motorsport car number 61. Leading in Class C is the Paul Sheard Autosport Mazda number 127. Neil Luke behind the wheel of that car. Leading in Class E is now Martin Short. No, it's still Morgan, isn't it? Have they made another pit stop? No, they haven't. So it is still Morgan Short at the wheel of the number 66 car. Another car that didn't make a pit stop during that safety car, 19th place overall. And that's the car that leads in Class E, the BMW 116i class. Leading Class A61 is the 318 in BOE Trust car, David Drinkwater. Appropriate enough name with a team name like in BOE Trust. David Drinkwater, then, though, a regular competitor at the Race of Remembrance and also regular competitor in endurance racing all around the world, in fact. Seen him in Dubai, in Spain, and in other long-distance races. Word of Portugal gets thrown at me from my left. So David Drinkwater, as I say, a regular and reliable driver in the night time. He leads Class AC1 with the Citroen C1, and then leading ACC class is Stephen Bliss with the Toyota Aygo number 578. That car, one of only two in the ACC class. So 55 minutes remain on the clock. This is the final countdown to the end of part one of the Race of Remembrance here at the Anglesey circuit, and just a lap separates the race leader 19 Lotus Elise from the Caterham number 97 in second place. It's pretty much a lap and a half. Number 19 Rob Boster, Peter Mansfield now at the wheel. Peter Mansfield just coming up and across the line now, whilst the second place car is a lap behind and up at Peel, coming down into the corkscrew or Seaman, depending which version of the circuit we're using. And that car in second place then, Andy Perry at the wheel, and he's a further lap ahead of number 64, Giuseppe Felle, who is just trying to work out how far back. There is a lap of a difference between, yes, there he is, just through the hairpin and coming back down the straight towards us. That will be putting 161 laps on the map for him. So yeah, further lap behind for Giuseppe Fellet. So the gaps between the leading runners beginning to stretch as the race wears into its final hour of part one. Now, seldom do we get a safety car that we don't immediately get followed by some stop-and-go penalties, and sure enough, we've got some again. So, assuming that, again, safety car procedures weren't properly followed, we've got a stop-and-go penalty for one of the leading runners, and it's misfortune, I'm afraid, if you're a Caterham fan. Rocket Racing, number 97, has just been awarded a stop-and-go penalty. And so 97, Andy Perry, will be into the pits within the next 3 laps. I think the regulation is that you have to take that penalty. And so Andy Perry will be required to come into the pits to serve that penalty as soon as the message reaches him. No doubt if the radio is working, he'll have heard about it on the radio. And otherwise, he's been given a board to show him that. That was him going past now, I think. Number 97 just taken the start-finish line. And so there was a bit of traffic around him, so he might have an excuse to miss it once. See if he comes in at the end of this lap. But there's seldom any recourse. The judges of fact who observe the deployment of the safety car have CCTV at their disposal to check their decisions. And as I say, for the misfortune of Andy Perry will only be whether or not he can get into the pits, serve his penalty and get out again before the Solo 64 Caterham comes by and takes the position from him. Those cars, 97 currently running second place overall. The Solo 64 Giuseppe Fellet running in third place overall, car number 64. So still waiting for Andy Perry to come in and serve his penalty. And he is halfway around a lap at the moment, so he's not going to be coming in just at the moment. As I say, he came past the line in a bit of a gaggle of traffic last time, and just trying to pick him up off the tracker display that we have here at our disposal, and difficult to pick out where number 97 is at the moment. Peter Mansfield continuing his happy way. 1 minute 51 last time around, not as quick as he will want to have been going. I think 1:45 was more the mark for Peter Mansfield at this time of night, but with a 1 lap cushion on the next car up, knowing that the next car up has a penalty to serve, then his worries are few and far between. So, yeah, 97 just passed us on the far side of the circuit, going through School up towards Rocket now. Race leader Rob Boston, having lost a bit of ground last time around, I should say Peter Mansfield, the race leader, having lost a bit of ground last time around, 147 on his most recent lap, and still not as quick as Andy Perry, but far more reasonable and comparable a time from him. I think 97 reaching the limit of the time he's going to be allowed before he has to take that stop and go penalty, because he hasn't done so yet. Number 169 is the next car to be given the stop and go penalty, and another significant one. That's George Grant, who's committed an offence, again guessing, but likely under the safety car. And so George Grant, the number 169 Mazda MX-5, 10th place overall, but having to come in to serve a stop and go penalty this or next time around. And 97 Andy Perry still not coming in. I don't think he's served his penalty already, so they're going to have to get the message through to him. Again, passes us on the far side of the circuit, comes out of church, heads along the very, very fast, what was Andrew Crichton saying to us earlier on, 120 to 130 miles an hour, going through those fast right-handers, right on the limit of adhesion. Just some white marker posts to guide you and tell you where the track limits are. Cars coming up fast behind you as well. Really keeps you on your toes, and no mistake about that. So George Grant due into the pits to serve a stop and go penalty, number 169. Andy Perry due to come in and serve a stop and go penalty, number 97. Neither of them have been in yet. And I hope we're not in the kind of situation where we get an argument and it can't be amicably resolved, but still 97 out there and yet to serve that penalty. So unless he served it very quickly and I missed it, which is a possibility, 5 pit stops altogether for the 97 car. I'm tempted to suggest that's unlikely. George Grant is in for his stop and go, so credit to him, and that is only the 3rd pit stop for that car. So George Grant and the Clapham North MOT team have kept themselves nicely out of trouble, I have to say. And let's say what we need to do now is merely to keep an eye on the number 97 car, because by my reckoning that car still is due to make this stop. He's on the straight at the moment, coming back down into the bus stop. Let's have a look out of the window and see if we can see him coming in this time. Otherwise, I think I'll have to assume that he's taken the stop while I was watching other things. Coming down then in towards the bus stop at the moment. In fact, he's already gone through and onto another lap. So number 97 then was assessed the penalty, either took it very rapidly and then came out again, or, as I say, that penalty still one to be served. Fraser Riddington into the pits with number 61, and That will lose him 4th place overall, and probably the lead of the relay class, more importantly to him, because it will give back the lead of the relay class to the ES Motorsport team of Lotus Elises. Bailey currently in the car, or currently on the track, I should say, in his car. And then Tim Steele is the next one up with number 88. So relay cars, 4th, 5th and 6th, but 61 in the pits at the moment. And so that will likely be 61 Fraser Riddington handing over to Angus McLean, I think, on the rotation. 5 hours and just under 20 minutes of the race gone, of this 6-hour segment gone, and happy to say that the conditions, if you're listening on the World Wide Web and not here at the circuit, you'll be need to be told, conditions for this segment of the race have been nigh on perfect. It's been dark since just before 5 o'clock, and the cloud cover has been intermittent. The wind has been a lot less fierce than it was on Friday, and a lot more gentle, and there has been some wind, but not very much, and certainly not as much as, quite frankly, was affecting things yesterday, but today are far more pleasant conditions in which to race. Andy Perry then happily running in 2nd place then. Can only assume that he took the penalty very early on after it was issued, and then by the time I picked up the message he'd already served it. So he's there in 2nd place, albeit a lap and a half off Peter Mansfield's lead. Mansfield, number 19, having completed 170 laps, and 97 Andy Perry will be coming down through the hairpin in a minute, and then coming up to complete his 169th lap, so a lap and a half or so away from the leader. That represents, in terms of time, about 2.5 minutes is all it is. So Peter Mansfield, 1:48 on that last lap, and is continuing to lap consistently. That's what we've been saying all along, that the important thing, not absolute pace, and Peter Mansfield, a very consistent lapper indeed, and keeping the car just where it needs to be at the front of the field with a cushion. Even if the safety car comes out, then that lap of a lead will be preserved.
Attention paddock, this is just a test announcement.
The aim of Peter Mansfield is to get it to be 2 laps before the end of this segment or not, I don't know. Obviously any advantage that he can take, he'd like to, but I think asking him to make up that much space in the remaining 40 minutes of this segment is going to be too big of a challenge for Peter Mansfield, even with that Lotus Elise, which has proved itself very, very rapid, and touch wood, so far has been reliable. The only unscheduled pit stops he's had to make have been those penalties which he's been given by the race control. Andy Perry lapping in the 143s, so quicker than Peter Mansfield, but I suppose the thing that Peter Mansfield does want to do is to avoid being unlapped. Never mind about putting 2 laps on the Caterham. He does need very much to avoid being unlapped. Giuseppe Fellet with the 64 car is lapping around the same sort of pace as Andy Perry. And then it's Bailey Edwards, the next one up with the Lotus. Tim Steele with the Caterham is lapping quicker than Bailey Edwards, but again, not going to be overtaken just yet. And then the next up, as far as the Heroes Trophy is concerned, and in 4th place in Class D, is Danny Holland, winner of the Biathlon of Foolishness earlier on today, and a fairly comfortable winner as well, it has to be said. It was a bit of a hero run from Danny. How much of a swim he had, nobody really knows, but the aim of the exercise was to get down, get into the water and come out again. I think he might have just taken the water as being the destination, but as James Cameron explained later on, the tide was out, so it would have been a slightly taller order to make it to full swimming distance. Anyway, Danny Holland currently exhibiting his driving skills, having shown us his running ability earlier on. Number 777 in 6th place overall, and as I said, I'll repeat, 4th in the Class D. 5th in Class D, number 117, David McAnulty in the Able Care Lotus Elise. And then 6th in Class D, the Porsche Cayman of Colin Gillespie, car number 15, the car that started on the front row of the grid. And has been reliable, has been consistent, and as Andrew and I were saying earlier on, we'll be there to pick up the pieces should there be any pieces to be picked up, but the way the cars in front are going, I think that may be a forlorn hope. A top 6 finish is probably the best overall, a top 6 finish. A podium, that's going to rely on the unreliability of those ahead of him. Angus McLean is at the wheel of the 61 relay team car now, the all-black car, suitable enough that they choose the least easy to see car to run at the darkest point in the race. But anyway, Angus McLean then in 9th place overall and 3rd in the relay race. Tom O'Flanagan, Taylor O'Flanagan, I mean, in number 71 is next up. And then we've got George Grant leading the way in Class B. Class B doing very well indeed at the moment to be not only up in 11th place overall, but ahead of the Class C leader, which is still Neil Luke, Porsche Motorsport, but the Mazda in the pits at the moment, and just skipping down the list. Need to keep an eye on that to see whether that's a routine pit stop or a slightly longer one for other reasons. Martin Short should by now be at the wheel of the number 66 Track Club BMW, the Track Club car leading the way in Class E. And Martin was due to take it over for this segment of the race. In fact, he was suggesting that Craig Denman might even be back in the car to complete the stint, and whether or not that car, the Track Club BMW, has enough fuel to get it to the end of the race, that remains to be seen. Just the 2 pit stops for Martin, and that's as few pit stops as anybody's had. So Track Club's strategy has very clearly been, let's stay out of the pits as much as we possibly can, boys. And as I said, so far that's what they've achieved. Class C, as I said, being led by Paul Sheard Automotive, and Adam Marchant-Wincott back at the wheel of that car. Adam, the COO of Mission Motorsport. Spent 19 years in the Royal Artillery and then joined Mission Motorsport pretty much at the beginning of its career in 2013. '18th place overall for Martin Short in the Track Club BMW. A team which possibly is disappointed is the PT Motorsport Caterham, number 28. The Caterham team having started going very well indeed in the top 3 places with car number 28, but that car for some reason has lost a lot of ground, and I can't necessarily suggest that that was because of slow pit stops, because with a 3-car relay team you shouldn't have slow pit stops. It should just be a case of having the next driver ready to go out again. But Stefano Mara, who is currently at the wheel, down to 12th place overall, 4th out of the 4 relay runners, and we don't have a full record of all the stops for that car, other than that it has made 4 of them. Not sure if any of them has been particularly long in pit stops, but a best lap of 1 minute 40. Stefano lapping in the 144s, shouldn't be as far off the lead as he is at the moment, 7 laps off the lead relay team. Could you use 7 laps in 5.5 hours? Well, he has done. So I'll say that disappointment for that team. Whether or not we'll be able to find out overnight quite what problems he had, I don't know.
Attention pit lane, message for all teams, race remembrance. Just a reminder again of the bulletin that was issued yesterday at 16:01.
Peter Mansfield.
There will be no parc fermé conditions this evening when the checker flag goes out.
Perry.
The only condition is
remember from a couple of years ago
the
when
driver
Peter
that
was at
finishes
the wheel that
the race this evening must
sometimes
start the race tomorrow.
Seemed to lose
No parc
his way
fermé
a little
conditions,
bit,
you may
lose his
refuel,
confidence in the car
but the driver
a little
that
bit,
finishes
that can
the
happen
race
at
this
night.
evening must start tomorrow.
Have a little moment somewhere and you get your heartbeat up, and then you have to work on getting the focus back again. So we'll keep an eye on the lap time, see how Peter continues. It's a just a 2-man crew in this, the leading car from Rob Boston Racing, but it was success 2 years ago, and that's, I was about to say another safety car. We've only a yellow flag at the moment, but yellow flag being shown at the start-finish line, indicating that there is danger just around target, and reason for drivers not to overtake, to slow down, but it's not a full safety car, so just turn 1, just target is where there is an issue of some kind. But I'm afraid I can't give you any more information than that because it's dark. So, and the yellow flag is withdrawn. So whatever it was has sorted itself out, and we've been able to continue on the way. car 65, the Morgan, has been running a little bit more reliably now with Paul Vokes at the wheel, although without a bonnet. No engine cover on the front of the Morgan, looking even more trad than otherwise it would. And Paul Vokes, currently at the wheel of that car, lost a lot of ground early on. Took about an hour to get going at the beginning of the race. And since then, their race has been all about catch-up. And it's been worth it. They're up to 47th. They were solid last at the beginning of the race. So that's already a gain of 6 places on the field. The Royal Air Force car number 18 doggedly stuck in the pits. That's the Logan Hoggis car. Harry Ormerod also stuck solidly in the pits, having the gearbox repaired, changed, removed. The car that led the race for a short time in the early stages at the end of the first hour, in the hands of Ricky Coomber himself. But since then, Harry Ormerod had a good stint of his own, but then brought the car in with the gearbox needing work doing to it. Class AC1 still in the hands of David Drinkwater in the Citroen, and he's got a fairly useful margin of a lap nearly on the next car up in the AC1 class, which is the CSC racing car, number 417, which is Stephen Cunliffe driving at the moment. And that car in the lead of AC1. Claire Smith is out in the car number 102 in the Mission Motorsport car. She down in 9th place as far as Class AC1 is concerned, but will no doubt be enjoying the experience of driving a Citroen C1. Has previously driven a BMW Mini here at the Race of Remembrance. And Claire, a vital cog in the gearbox of the Mission Motorsport organisation. And as I say, she'll be relishing her time out on the track at the moment. Class C, already mentioned Adam Marchant-Wincott, leading the class at the moment in the Paul Sheard Autosport Mazda MX-5. Second in the class is the other Ricky Coomber car, the RKC Motorsport Honda Civic, running in the less powerful class. And Dominic Bush has done a fair bit of driving in that car, had some penalties to absorb, otherwise would no doubt be challenging Adam Marchant-Wincott for the lead of the class, but is currently in second place in the class, a lap and a half adrift of the Mazda. The Mazda's in 19th place overall, and Dominic Bush with the Honda Civic is in 21st place overall. Those two sandwiching the 666 Morgan Plus 4, the other privateer Morgan. We've got 2 Works and 2 privateer Morgans here, and number 666 running in Class D and running ahead. No, it's running ahead of the 65 car, but behind the 2 Works cars, if you will. Although the 666 car, bit of both really. The 29 car up in 13th place overall, and that James Taylor has just taken that car over from Shane Kelly, who was at the wheel. James Taylor getting into the car at its most recent pit stop. The Mission Motorsport beneficiaries Morgan, car number 40, the one that's been adapted to run with the hand controls, currently on 130 laps. So Paul Vokes with the PT Motorsport Morgan actually ahead of it at the moment. So that's one objective ticked off. I was talking to Paul Vokes before the race began, just having a little chat with him, and they certainly weren't expecting to spend the first hour of the race in the pits. But having spent the first hour of the race in the pits, they probably didn't expect either to then be able to be ahead of the number 40 car as the race ticks into the closing minutes of part one. So it was Lee Noble who was last out in the number 40 car. Linda Noble, who having her second go behind the wheel of that car. So whether Steve Binns and John Hogan, I don't know if John Hogan's been out or not, but Linda Noble then back out at the wheel of that car. Lionel O'Connor, yes, if Lionel O'Connor's had 2 stints, Linda Noble will be on her second stint now, and then Steve Binns and John Hogan, the other 2 drivers requiring the hand controls on that car, going very nicely indeed now. Linda's last lap, a 2 minutes 12 compared to Paul Vokes, who last time around did a 1 minute 49 and is also 3 laps clear of the Mission Motorsport car. Anything happening up ahead of that? David Drinkwater is in the pits. I suppose we should make note of that. Will he lose the lead of the class whilst he is there? We'll have to wait and see. No refuelling allowed in the final 15 minutes of this segment of the race, as far as I understand the way the regulations are written. So if you need fuel, you need to come in before the last 15 minutes of this part of the race. And we are not that far away from the last 15 minutes. We're just ticking the clock down now, down to 20 minutes, 21 minutes, and a few seconds remain in the race. Let me answer another question that I posed earlier on, which was what was going to happen after Nick Rutter had taken his penalty. Well, the Clapham North MOT car has now completed taking its penalty and making a routine pit stop. George Grant out of the car now, Nick Rutter into it, and the car's still leading Class D. Class B, I misspoke. And the gap between the Mazda and the competition being still the Track Scotland car, Adam Morrison at the wheel of the Mini R50, and that gap at the moment just 25 seconds. So a bit of a battle on in the remaining 20 minutes. 20 minutes and 25 seconds, although last time around Nick Rutter considerably quicker in the Mazda than Adam Morrison was in the Mini. So honours held by the faster of the 2 runners at the moment. 20 minutes remain until the end of part 1. Just been joined up here in the commentary box by Steve Leeds. Heads up, Jaguar Land Rovers fill me in. What was the job title?
Yeah, so I've been with Mission Motorsport for the last 3.5 years, and I manage Jaguar Land Rover's Armed Forces Engagement Programme, so the Armed Forces Engagement lead for Jaguar Land Rover. So Mission Motorsport have supported Jaguar Land Rover's Armed Forces Engagement since the end of the First Invictus Games back in 2014, and we've managed their Armed Forces Engagement Programme with a Programme Manager ever since. So the first guy to do was a guy called Charlie Catling, an ex-infantry officer. He now works at Lister Heritage, and since then there was a lady called Emma Morton did it for a while, and I joined in July 2018.
And I suppose the question is, Steve, how's it going?
Well, it's been, obviously when it came in July 2018, it was a very challenging time for the industry. So where we had recruited in large numbers before, and Jaguar Land Rover over the course of the period of time while they've been doing armed force engagement, they've put over 1,000 veterans and service leavers into jobs globally, over 700 of those in the UK. But it all came to grinding standstill in 2018. And actually what I found, I was supporting people who were leaving Jaguar Land Rover find other jobs elsewhere in the industry. But of course recently it has really picked up, and we are looking for service leaver talent, veteran talent, military spouses, anybody from the armed forces community, and that's across the industry. It's not just Jaguar Land Rover. Aston Martin are recruiting in numbers, and of course we've talked already today about Lotus, and Lotus being on board with Mission Automotive. So it's a really good time to be a job hunter, looking for a job in the automotive industry.
And what's the programme? Are you doing, is it the same thing basically as the overall Mission Motorsport plan, which is to say, you know, getting veterans, service leaders, ex-servicemen into jobs, rehabilitating, retraining, recovering? Is that the same programme basically as Mission Motorsport is looking at?
Absolutely. So of course, based on the success of what we've done with the wounded, injured and sick with Mission Motorsport, in 2019 and that's partnered with the Royal Foundation and the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, and delivered by Mission Motorsport. And so it's supporting right the way across the board, and not only do I do the stuff with Jaguar Land Rover, with the experience that I've got with Jaguar Land Rover, I'm also helping with that advocacy piece with the Lotus programme, the Stellantis programme, and all the other companies within the automotive industry that we're supporting at the moment. And yeah, it is very busy.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're not short of things to do. So I have to say, Steve, I haven't actually noticed any Land Rovers here. So what's your role here at the Race of Remembrance?
So I work for the charity, so this is my third Race of Remembrance.
So you're out shaking the tin?
So, well, yeah, and the other thing is, obviously, I'll be going back into work on Monday morning, or Tuesday morning, when I get back, and I'll be saying, look at the engagement that Lotus have done, look at the engagement that Morgan have done, and putting a light up Jaguar Land Rover and saying, let's get back on it. Of course, well, we had the last poppy car was...
Well, I was going to say, we had the F-Type Jaguar. I was talking to Steve Morris earlier on. He's the MD of Morgan, and I was trying to persuade him that maybe a poppy car over a Morgan shape would look very nice. What about a poppy Land Rover?
Well, we certainly could consider that, and that's something we can look at. And of course, we've already got a Land Rover Discovery on loan, which has been on loan for almost 4 years now, to the charity from Jaguar Land Rover, and we're currently looking at a replacement for that vehicle, or replacement vehicles potentially. But yeah, there's no reason why we can't do something like. I'm not sure what sort of safety car that would be though.
Oh no, yeah, you probably need. It would be as good as a rescue unit.
Yeah,
yeah.
But there's other things we do as well, and certainly that's one area where the brand can offer support and to some of the activity that we do, particularly with the wounded, injured and sick. So when we take people across the off-road training circuit at Thruxton, for example, and give them that opportunity, training people up as off-road instructors and giving them that opportunity as well. So yeah, there's plenty more we can do outside of Race of Remembrance for continuing that support throughout the year.
And is your interest purely around Mission Motorsport and Race of Remembrance? Are you involved in other parts of the motor racing scene in any way? Do you race yourself? Do you drive yourself?
No, I don't race.
You're like me.
I've spent very little time on a racetrack. A little bit more time doing the off-roading stuff, and I think that probably my talent probably wouldn't stretch to being out there today. I really do admire the people that are
you
out
don't you don't look on enviously at them driving, saying I could do better than that.
No, I certainly couldn't do better. I'd like to, but it's just one of those things that I think I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, well, probably not your game.
I was going to say, Steve, I mean, it sounds from what you've been saying about your job description that it would leave very little time for such activities as driving racing cars anyway, because you're involved in so many other things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in addition to what we're doing in terms of the Armed Forces engagement, Jaguar Land Rover have been Gold Award holders on the Employer Recognition Scheme since 2015, and we revalidated at the 5-year point in 2020. And part of that being gold on the Employer Recognition Scheme is advocacy. So that advocacy is encouraging other companies and supporting other companies. So Jaguar Land Rover are firmly behind me, supporting Stellantis and supporting Lotus and Morgan and all the other companies that are on board and interested in supporting what we do. So, and in addition to that, I have a number of other roles. So I'm the chair of the Wales and West Midlands Gold Award Association. I've recently become the national deputy chair of the Gold Award Association, and that is just, that is promoting armed force engagement across across all industries. And not only that, we're helping defence shape what armed forces engagement should look like. So we're helping the Defence Relationship Management team and the Office of Veteran Affairs in how they can engage with employers by having that representative voice with the employers.
I mean, it sounds from what you're saying as if, what you've described is not a job that one person can do. You must be surrounded by a team of people that you're liaising with in order to make that kind of thing happen. You're not an island, are you? Or are you running around doing all this on your own?
There's a bit of running around. Yeah, and sometimes I could have done with a few more of me times this year. But a lot of it is showing people how they can do this and giving them the tools, giving them the knowledge, providing that advice. It's almost in a consultancy role and saying you can do this and this is what you need to put into place. And a lot of what I do relies on support from every part of the business within Jaguar Land Rover, from other companies as well, and in them investing in it and putting their support behind it. But also the advantage of, some companies have their own organic armed forces engagement lead within the company. For us at Jaguar Land Rover, the advantage of having Mission Automotive supporting Jaguar Land Rover's armed force engagement from the Mission Motorsport team is I have that network of people that can support. So it's not just my experience I'm drawing on, it's the experience of talking to the beneficiaries and knowing them. It's the experience of being able to talk to the whole team. So James Cameron, Adam, everybody within that team, and getting a much wider perspective.
Last question, because we've got less than 10 minutes of the race tonight to go. Do you have a military background yourself? What drew you into? I was going to say what drew you into Mission Motorsport, but military background.
I did 22 years in the army, 20 years as an infantry officer. I was made redundant in 2013. And because I was made redundant, I sort of shied away from the military networks and the military environment for a number of years. But just, one day when I felt I was ready, I saw a post that Adam had put on looking for a program manager for Jaguar Land Rover. I'm a petrol head. I love cars. I was brought up around being dragged around car shows as a child, and so I said, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "Come and speak to us," and it just flowed from there.
And not a decision that you regret, I don't think,
no,
Steve.
Absolutely not.
Indeed, great. Thanks for talking to us, Steve. Leeds then from Jaguar Land Rover, and as I mentioned there very briefly, 10 minutes to go, less than 10 minutes now, 8.5 minutes remain of the race of remembrance. We're running short of batteries here, Andrew. I don't know if we're going to... I think we've got enough to see us through the remaining part of this race, but if we can find some more batteries for tomorrow, that will be vital. Thanks very much to Steve Leeds. And 8 minutes remain then of the part one, the Saturday element of the race of remembrance. The... the die has been cast. If you take the view of it being rolling of a dice. We know what the first few throws have been, Andrew. What's your reading for where it's going to go tomorrow?
Well, the reading for tomorrow, well, I've got a feeling that we're not seeing the last of ES Motorsport back in 5th place. Talking that one through, they'd always anticipated this to be a relay team. So... whilst we thought that perhaps they were going for the single car, it was always going to
probably a program error rather than anything else then.
I think so, yeah. I think it may have been the way in which the entry was being made somehow or another. So
understood.
It's always been vaunted to be a relay team, so that 34 car is going to be in there pitching for it somehow or another. Rob Boston looks pretty comfortably set, doesn't he? I went up the pit lane just now, and the 99 car still sits there, the Honda Civic, with the gearbox out. At least there's 2 gearboxes on the floor, so I imagine that overnight we might see it back out, but it's lost so much time now.
Yeah, I mean, but this is it. You do the race of remembrance to participate in the race of remembrance, not necessarily to come first. And, we were saying earlier on, it's too early to throw in the towel, even at this distance. And, I mean, if they've got people who are prepared to work and get it fixed overnight, I think they probably will.
And obviously that leniency on parc fermé conditions
helps a lot.
Allows them to be able to get the car finished and hopefully ready to go tomorrow morning. And having started race of remembrance, you just would want to finish it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't want to give in.
Get that checkered flag at the end of the 12 hours is what I say.
The whole essence of race of remembrance is about winning one way or another and not giving in. And that would exemplify it.
Carrying on. Well, I mean, I was impressed by the attitude of the number 65 Morgan team, who you had up on its axle stands. In fact, for the first hour of the race, they lost the first hour, were dead last, and now they're moving up the field. They're now in the 40th with that Morgan. This is the...
what happened to the John Earp Lotus?
Still going.
22.
The number 5 Lotus Elise,
that's the
one that had all its
one that started right from the back,
very back of the field. It started. It is, where is it now in the field? There it is, 49th out of 53. They're on the track at the moment, so they're making up ground in terms of number of laps completed. They've done 124. That compares with the Ricky Coomber Motorsport car. Harry Ormerod, remember, brought that car into the pits with the gearbox needing looking at. They've done 112 laps, so they're well ahead of them. The PT Motorsport, Paul Vokes currently at the wheel of that Morgan, they're up to 47th from dead last on the grid. So really the rate of attrition, if you look at the number of cars that are definitely out of the race, I think we've probably only got 2 cars that are definitely out. That's the number 100 that stopped after just 4 laps and pulled up against the pit lane here, brought the safety car out. And the only other one we've lost is the TWP Racing that Brad Philpott brought into the pits, having completed 14 laps. We've not seen any more of that, and that's number 59
they're still working feverishly on that car, I think, up at the top of the pits in Garage 22.
Right.
So Brad Philpott, really quick driver, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a lot of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yep, that may be another one where perseverance counts for something in the end.
Yeah, quite. So, yellow flags being shown at the start-finish line. It is with 3 minutes to go. Now, that's going to be interesting. 3 minutes to go in the race. We've got a safety car out. And the reason I kind of paused and hesitated is that almost certainly that means the safety car will still be out when the checkered flag is shown. And that means that all the gaps around the field will be closed up, which rather removes a lot of the impact of the way the rules are written with the aggregate race. But anyway, we'll see.
Okay, well, we've got 2 recovery trucks going out, so that's interesting. Have we seen where the issue is?
Yes, they're headed out towards Target at the moment, heading up to the banking. We've seen 2 recovery units dispatched before, only to see the cars which had stopped at the banking recover themselves, and they'd just become bogged down. I think if the incident was at the top end of the circuit, the recovery units would have gone onto the track at school, wouldn't they?
Possibly. I think that maybe looking up on the brow of the hill there, it could be Rocket Out.
Okay.
Or, sorry, between Rocket In and Rocket Out. There's flashing lights up there, so that could well be it.
Okay, Andrew Crichton's been eating his carrots.
Looking up at the top of the hill there, you can see the safety car just passing those lights now. So
are they yellow flashing lights of a vehicle, or are they yellow flashing lights just to say there is a yellow flag out on the circuit, though?
The yellow lights should be...
Let's look over towards Church, Andrew, because the rescue units that were dispatched from here have stopped at Church.
Yeah, well spotted.
It's a matter of which direction to look in, but so whoever it is that's gone off and caused the problem would seem to have had a total power failure as well, because no lights on the competition car, the only lights are on the recovery units, and they are off to driver's right, and a car going slowly is sort of BMW shaped, but difficult to really pick out what shape it is. Looking across there, that car.
Okay, that car seemed to emerge from behind them, but there's some green lights behind the first of those recovery trucks.
Yeah, it kind of emerged from a different place than it should have done, didn't it? I just wonder whether that car was actually over up against the barrier, and having got going again, it saw the recovery vehicles and took off in fright, a bit like my cat does when you appear at it when it doesn't expect it.
Well, looking at where those green roof lights are, I should think that possibly this is going to be a question of how do we actually reach it across the marsh to get it out.
And we're not going to be able to do that before the checkered flag, because we're half a minute away from when the checkered flag is due.
Yeah.
And so we are going to finish the first part of the race under safety car conditions. They will come through next time around. I was going to say to be greeted by the checkered flag, but they're already round, and the countdown is 10 seconds to go. Safety car goes through, and so the checkered flag will have to wait until next time around, unless they show it whilst the safety car train is going through, which is going to confuse the timekeepers in a right royal fashion. No, they're going to wait until the safety car train passes.
So they've got the car out now, Paul.
Good.
There it is. It's one of the minis.
Oh,
it's
right.
one of the Scottish minis by the look of it.
Okay. I think there only is one Scottish mini, isn't there? Oh, no, there are 2. I do beg your pardon.
Track Scotland, car 55.
55 and 155.
155. So we've still got safety car board out. Goodness knows what's happening up here.
55 is the one which is being shown on the screen as being missing. Rest of the field going through slowly. The 6 hours of part 1 has elapsed. The rescue unit is rescuing that 55 Mini. Looks almost like an old-shaped Mini, actually, with the ID lights on it, doesn't it? Yep. Certainly shades of old-shape Mini, the way that the lights pick it out. And the safety car doesn't look like it's going to overtake the rescue units, but I'm guessing the rescue units will pull off at school gate. No, they're going to go all the way around. Well, this is going to be a bizarre end to part 1 of the race. Unless the safety car leads them around, I don't think the safety car is going to go through ahead of that group somehow, Andrew. I think he's going to wait behind the rescue units.
Well, I think he's got to, hasn't he, really? It's the
interesting way to end part 1. We said it would be an interesting race, but that's not what I expected.
It is a race of remembrance, and it would be boring if it was straightforward.
Not what I expected in any way. Yeah, so
interesting little bit of confusion happened down here.
Yes, tell me.
I think the C1, obviously hazard lights on, possibly misread the signature, the signs down here on the start finish. Maybe they thought it was checkered flag. Maybe they're still seeing the safety car. Pulled over slightly to the right-hand side, and the confusion was, under a safety car, you can't overtake, can you?
Correct.
So, presumably, those behind decided they were going to play to the letter of the law.
No, if a car is in trouble, then you are allowed to overtake it.
Absolutely,
but if it can't keep the pace that is being set by the safety car queue, then you are allowed to overtake. But when the safety car queue actually almost grinds to a halt, as it nearly did over on the far side of the circuit there, then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm surprised that the rescue units are even taking the full course up the Tom Price Straight. I thought they might at least come down through the corkscrew.
Well, of course, you see, maybe Track Scotland are just trying to finish a lap, Paul.
Well,
if they bring them down across the timing line, they will have finished a lap, won't they?
It will be shown as coming into the pits at any event, yes, and finishing, completing the lap in the pits will count as a lap completed.
How much time, now that they are able to repair the car, and presumably the only reason it didn't get going again was because it was bogged down over there. Possibly they go into part non-part firme overnight to get the car repaired. They actually have not lost a fat lot, have they?
Absolutely right. They've lost a place to the other Track Scotland car whilst they were being bogged down. So the 155 Track Scotland's car has moved up into second place, third place in the class. Up into second place in the class is the Numbers Racing Mazda MX-5. So it's Mazda MX-5 1-2 in Class B, with the Clapham North MOT team leading the way, and then Numbers Racing number 67 in second place in Class B at the moment.
So we're down to 0 time. The safety car going across the line.
And the checkered flag being showed. So the safety car will lead them across the line with the checkered flag. The timekeepers will stop the clock on each car as it goes through, and that will then set the time differentials that will start part 2 of the race with at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, a most unexpected finish to the race. We're still waiting. There he goes, the race leader across the line now, midway in the pack behind the safety car. Peter Mansfield, though, does take the checkered flag, and therefore the win in the part 1 of this race. 6 hours, 4 minutes, 45 seconds, .106. 6 hours, 4 minutes, 45.106 seconds then, and 193 laps completed for Peter Mansfield. And the effect of the safety car being out, Andrew, and this is interesting, is that Andy Perry in the Rocket Racing car has got his lap back and finishes part 1 of the race on 193 laps as well, just 5 seconds behind. So you can't hope for it being much closer than that. So 193 laps each, 5.7 seconds separates the first two.
That's going to be pretty nail-biting tomorrow, isn't it?
It starts the race we'd like it to be, the way we'd like it to start anyway. 1 lap behind Giuseppe Felle with the number 64 Solo 64 Caterham. He's in 3rd place. And then there's a big gap, 5 further laps down, 6 laps altogether. 187 laps completed for the 777 Caterham 270R. Paddle up with Love Cars. Danny Holland following up his win in the biathlon of Foolishness. Number 777 finishing in 4th place overall, but as I say, 5 laps off the car of the Solo 64 team. In 5th place, number 88, leader in the relay team, Tim Steele for breakdancers. In 6th place, car number 34, the ES Motorsport Lotus Elise team, Bailey Edwards finishing up. All 3 of those cars on 187 laps. On 186 laps in 7th place, car number 61 is another relay car. This the AOPF motorsport car of Angus McLean, and he finishes 7th. In 8th place is the AbleCare Lotus Elise, but 5th in Class D. That's car number 117 on 185 laps. Also on 185 laps is Taylor O'Flanagan in the number 71 car, the Q6 Motorsport entry, another Caterham. In 10th place, car number 15, the Porsche Cayman that started part 1 on the front but fell back earlier on and finishes up on 185 laps. So not that far off the pace. He was 10th.
Must be a bit of a story there, Paul, behind the Lodge Sports Racing car, because we were only talking about that a relatively short period of time with it sitting in 4th place.
Yes, but yes, it has had its ups and its downs. 6 pit stops altogether, so it took penalties earlier on. I think what happens is that some of the drivers not quite as quick as the others. I think maybe it's lost time there, but it would be interesting. I think somewhere on the TSL website you can download the pit stop time, so that might be a job for us to do overnight to see whether it's lost the time on the track or on the pit lane instead. That finishes up in 10th. In 11th place is the Q6 Motorsport Caterham, car number 70. Andrew Bergbaum bringing that car across the line at the checkered flag. And then in 12th place, car number 29, James Taylor with the Works Morgan. This is the fastest of the Morgans, the one driven by the able-bodied team, not with the hand controls on that car, but number 29 finishing in 12th place. In 13th place is the Clapham North MOT team. Nick Rutter bringing the car home in 13th place, but leading its class, importantly, as far as they're concerned. Then it's number 28, Caterham, in 14th. In 15th is the Numbers Racing Mazda MX-5, car number 67. In 16th place is the Track Scotland 2 car. That's the one that wasn't on the end of a tow rope. And then in 17th place, the Track Scotland car that was on the end of a tow rope, being Adam Morrison's car. That was 17th. So if they can get the car repaired and ready to go, then they'll be starting, some 16 laps behind overall. 177 laps completed for them. 18th, the Morgan car number 666. With Robbie Anderson behind the wheel. 19th is Adam Marchant Wilcox, Paul Sheard Autosport car number 127 that leads Class C at the moment. In 20th is the car that leads Class E, being the Track Love car, which the Short family is driving, ably assisted by Craig Denham, and Craig Denman finishing the driving in that car, as Martin suggested he would. And then it's the number 999 finishing in 2nd place in Class C. That's the Ricky Coomber Motorsport car, Dominic Bush, the driver at the end there in number 999. And then next up, number 22, the Peaky Blinders team. 23rd fastest, or in 23rd place, is the CSC Racing BMW, 2nd in Class E. 24th is the NJM Racing Ford Fiesta. 25th is the 191 Stuart Humphrey Racing Mazda. 26th, the number 17 Royal Marines BMW, ahead of the 27th car, the Royal Air Force. So the Navy and the Air Force battling it out down in 26th and 27th places. I would recommend, if you want any more, that you look down on the TSL Timing website, tsl-timing.com. They will issue all of the results in due course, and their website, as I say, a very full one. There's lap charts for every race and all the information you could possibly want on their website, so I'll point you in the direction of that. But I think for the moment, as the remaining cars come into the pit lane at the end of part 1, rather than being taken into Parc Fermé as I thought they would be doing, they're being brought down into the pit garages. No Parc Fermé regulations apply overnight. You can do what you want to the cars overnight, and that will mean more work for some, I fear, than for others. And so that's the situation as far as the leaders are concerned. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, we get underway at 9 o'clock for part 2 of the race of Remembrance. Up until about 10 to 11, we'll bring the cars to a halt on the start-finish line in single file and pause for reflection and remembrance. One of the most moving parts of the Race of Remembrance race weekend, from, as I say, just before 11 until about 25 past or so, as soon as we can get underway. And then somebody will yell out, "Let's go racing." And at that point, everybody jumps in their cars and we forget about all of what we've just done and get on with the racing. No, we won't ever, because that's not what Remembrance is about. But we will get on with the racing, and the focus will once again be on winners and losers on the track. And as I say, we'll then run as long as we need to up until the 12 hours of the Race of Remembrance is complete. But that'll be about 3:30, 3:45 in the afternoon tomorrow. Until then, or rather until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to wrap it up from here, go and see if I can find something to eat. And I suggest you do the same, wherever you are in the world. Whether you've been listening on the island of Anglesey itself, on the loudspeakers, on the PA system, whether you've been listening on the radio show limited network of channels RS1, or through any other means, through YouTube channels or whatever. It's been very good having you listening to us, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Be there.